with their bodies, with their sex life and their marriage. And at the end, it's like, where do I even begin? And so that's where we start to drop in and be like, okay, where is a place where the soul and the body can meet without the mind and the conditioned thoughts coming up? Can we go there?
Being a dad is one of the most rewarding roles we will ever have in our lives, but also can be one of the most overwhelming, where we find ourselves facing the pressures of juggling the demands of our family, careers, and life. This show will feature industry experts in mental health, social services, and personal development, along with resilient dad role models whose stories of overcoming the challenges of parenting get a new vision for the life you and your kids deserve. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico, and this is the Resilient Dad Show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Dad Show. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico, and today we have the pleasure of having Emma Swain with us. Emma, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And so a bit about Emma. Emma is a certified holistic life coach, mind-body practitioner, and specialist in energy psychology. Emma has spent the last 10 years studying and practicing psychological healing modalities with clients, and over the last 2 years has been learning, teaching, and practicing Tantra worldwide. After witnessing the powerful transformation that took place in her own life, she's combined energy and psychology with tantric embodiment practices. She's an expert in connecting the mind and the body through understanding how energetics works. Emma has made it her life's mission to connect people back into their inner power through mastering their sexual energy so they can fall madly in love with life too. Her unique programs and practices and healing abilities allow for her clients to embody new patterns of behavior to truly live an orgasmic, extraordinary life. Emma, it sounds amazing.
It's wonderful. I wonder who wrote that.
Please, before we deep dive, tell us a bit more about yourself. Where it all started. Were you, always into, this kind of work, or was it something that was just purely through your own journey that you discovered, this new way of life?
So I was definitely not always the way I am now. That is for sure. I, about 3 years ago, really had my big wake up. I can't carry on the way I'm doing life. I had done my postgrad in psychology and I was very much in what we call the matrix. My mind space, I need to do this. I need to achieve that. This is going to get me the life I want. And everything seemed perfect and my life fell apart. And I started to gain weight and lose interest in life and perpetually built a really negative momentum in my journey. And it got to a point of having a suicide attempt and being calling it quits, I can't do this anymore. And I failed. And from that point, it was rebuilding and being what actually does it mean to live in this human experience? What does it mean to be embodied? What does it mean to have a purpose, but also to experience pleasure? How do we balance this? How do I move out of these stuck, conditioned mindsets and start to expand myself and then receive life and find joy and also create a life of my dreams? And so, the past 3 years have been a journey of a lifetime, and it's resulted in where we are today, which is that rather wonderful mouthful of an introduction of being generally orgasmic and loving life.
Definitely. We met in Bali back in September when a friend of mine, I went to visit Jay, and we were in a cafe, and I thought, okay, cool. We're going to get something to eat, or for Jay, it's a matcha that he loves. And we were sitting there, and Emma was there, just sitting by herself, quietly. And Jay started a conversation, and then we met this lovely, bubbly, full of joy and life person. So I'm very grateful that your attempt didn't work, and that we went for a matcha that night, and we sat the only table that was available, literally it was in the back. So it's definitely meant to be. So, and through that, finding your pain point and realizing that this isn't what your life is meant to be. What was the first step in your actual healing journey, and what was the first discovery?
So for me, the first thing that began to open my world was I went to an energy healer, and I was really against it. I was like, this esoteric stuff and trust the intuition and trust your flow was like a no-go. I was raised very Christian. I was very religious, and I had psychology. So I was very mind-based. Like, I know how to deal with things. I can psychoanalyze. And a girlfriend of mine said, Emma, for heaven's sake, you just had a suicide attempt. Like, you've got to try something different. And so I said, okay, I will give it a shot. And within 6 weeks of working with this woman, I had turned my life around. My health came back. I had multiple organ failure. I started coming off chronic meds. My body started to heal. I got a new job in London. It was in the middle of Corona. There was just like miracles were happening, like spontaneously. And that was when I was like, there's got to be more. Evidently, there's got to be more. And I started to delve into it. I love studying. I'm a big fan of embodiment and taking on what you learn. And so I started to unpack everything, every inch. I started to go down every roadway to be like, what is it to be embodied? And that was when we really let up. And then I studied as a mind body practitioner, and everything began to make sense.
And it's amazing how powerful the actual mind is. And that's something that I only realized over the last sort of 12 months of my own journey, that, medication and everything is just purely a mask of the actual, the issue. But the real healing is done within, and that we have the power within to be able to make the changes that we need to in our life when we want to. But I guess it's like you said, getting out of that mindset and those belief patterns that have been created. So you mentioned some of the belief patterns that you had prior that, you weren't interested in that kind of work. Tell us a bit more about, the belief systems and how our mind actually, works.
So what we discover in this journey, and I hope every single human being begins to realize this, is that our brain has different parts, and 95% of the brain itself is actually subconscious. So everything you are sensing, perceiving, receiving, thinking, understanding that's conscious makes up 5% of the mind. So very often when we are on our healing journey, we get these epiphany moments and we're like, cool, when there's a will, there's a way, baby. I've got this. I'm seeing the vision. I've got my shit. But you're dealing with 5 versus 95. So imagine, even on a logical level, like, is that going to work? No, we've got to tap into the 95%. We've got to start to shift the subconscious beliefs, and we've got to open up energetically to realize what's there. And so what I discovered in my journey was, as human beings, we're energy. Like, it's miraculous, it's amazing, but we are densified energy. If you look at the quantum atom, there's infinite space between it, but it's still an atom. We are built of these amazing things. So we have a field, an energetic field. And you can tell this because some people you'll walk past and you'll be like, oof, they're very stagnant, or God, they're so sharp, or your mind will feel like, oh, they're so open, I feel so relaxed. Their energy is transmitting out of their body. And in our field, there's so much behind that, but in our field, humans have 5 key layers that come out of our bodies. Right. And what I learned was, the first is the physical layer. Then you have your emotional layer, then your mental layer. Above that is your intuition and your bliss. Now, the majority of human beings today have got very stuck in their mental layer. And the mental layer is the interface between our emotions and our body and our intuition and our bliss. So many of us get stuck in our subconscious thinking. We lock down our emotions and we clamp into our body. So this begins to present in dis-ease, which is like disease in the mind, dis-ease in the body. And we can't access our emotions, we can't release, and so we begin to manifest. We get acne, we get swelling, we get weight gain. It depends where we are. But your mind, the subconscious mind, is what controls the body. So as we start to connect into unblocking the subconscious mind and how to repattern ourselves, you will find your 95% controls this, your beautiful body. We do not control how we breathe. We do not control, it's subconsciously generated. That being said, many of us who are stuck in our minds will find that the way we begin to unblock it is deeply beginning to tap into the body. When we sit for a moment and we stop fighting our sickness or our exhaustion or our hyperactivity or our addictive tendencies, and we ask, hey, what are you telling me right now? And we go there, very often a message comes. And it's like, oh my God, yeah, of course I'm holding weight on my belly because she doesn't feel safe. Or of course I have tension in my heart because I went through heartbreak that I never allowed myself to process. Or there will be things I was told I was never going to be lovable. So now I try and make myself super lovable, but I end up having to take blood pressure medication. We start to see that there's actually a story through our body that links to our mental blocks and our subconscious conditioning. When we begin to connect into our body and treat it not as us, but as our puppy. I always say my body's my puppy. I'm not my mind. I'm not my body. I'm a soul in a body with a mind. And we begin to talk to our puppies and love our puppies. They talk back. They begin to open. They begin to heal. And we start to see that's my block. And so very often when we're hitting mental blocks, the body will spike up. We'll get defensive. We'll get contracted. When the mind is expanding and opening, we'll feel
relaxed,
at ease. We can breathe. The more we heal this feedback loop, we will drop in firstly to our emotions. Many people who start healing, suddenly the emotions crack. It can be anger, sadness, numbness. There's a scale of emotions. And when we allow ourselves not to get stuck with our mental field on it, but to let them move, emotions, energy in motion, they move out. And so the stagnant energy in the body releases. And it is at that point we start to connect to our intuition and our bliss. We have cleared out the blocked energy through the mind, the emotion, and the body. And then we enter into this blissful state of being, this intuitive flow with life. And then we have our purpose and our direction, but we're guided and we're in homeostasis.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, the energy forces, like it's, like that thing when you're driving and you're stopped at a lights and you're looking over to someone and someone's not looking and then the next minute they look. Is that the kind of like the energy forces that there's that sort of feeling on someone's looking at you, but then you look over and it's like they are looking at you because that energy forces are connecting. Is that the forces, that an example of the forces connecting?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as human beings, a lot of us don't realize this to the extent of power that we have. But there is a force called quantum entanglement where our energy here can literally affect stars in the universe light years, thousands of light years away. And when we are opening in our fields, we will be sending out subconscious energetic signals to people around us. And they will feel it. And the more we open ourselves, the more we feel. And then we begin to synchronize with soul connections or crazy coincidences that actually become definable and we can manifest because we have intuitive insight and direction and we are open in our body and mind to receive and perceive. And so we begin to shift our belief system, and then we get a new perception of life. And then we have a new way of receiving and manifesting our desires. So we move from just the body and the mind and the emotion into the mathematical magic of the universe, of soul, of intuition, and of energy. But it takes place through the body. It's where we land.
And I guess allowing that moment to listen to yourself, like you're saying, we have that gut feeling of something, and then it's like afterwards, it's like I had that, like I should have listened to myself, or more times than not, if you listen to yourself, that's actually probably the right path that you're meant to, be on. And that's something that, it's taken me a long time to understand, because it's all that noise that you've got in the background, and it's really your mind. You're fighting with your mind, that I've experienced. But then when you've actually just stopped and really just thought about it, and just like you said, asking those questions, like, what does this mean? And that's just a simple question that I've started, to be able to ask myself before I put a meaning to it, and then get into that, deep into the emotions and that attachment of this is that experience that I'm having, instead of, understanding, what's the lesson in this experience, or the opportunity in it, which I found a really cool way, instead of going straight into that old story or that pattern, which then just, I guess, eliminates your ability to get into that intuition and bliss state. So
Yes.
that's really cool. And so is that also part to do with your surroundings, what you're focusing on, what you're listening to, what who you're surrounding yourself with, even the discussions that you're having, is that all part to play with the, reprogramming of the subconscious mind, that 95% that I guess controls our life, our day-to-day decisions, that we're not really aware of?
Absolutely. So there is a incredible science and study called epigenetics. Epigenetics is basically the biological study of the biology of belief, and it was pioneered by a man called Bruce Lipton. Epigenetics basically looks at the biological structure of cell response in the body to the environment. And when Dr. Lipton first started his research, he was like a skeptic, like, no, of course, like, I study biology, I know how cells work, but actually the Newtonian way of thinking about cells and our environment and our bodies and our mental reactions are not Newtonian. They are based on energy. And so what he did was took two stem cells, put them in the same, like exactly DNA replicates, put them in two little cuppies, and put them in different environments. One that was a controlled, safe environment, and the other that was not, an environmentally unsafe environment for the cell. Those cells, when they replicated, one formed into lung cells, stem cells, and the other turned into cancer stem cells. What he realized was, as he politely puts it, it's the environment, stupid. I too started to go through this in my own personal journey, because I love books, but I like practice. Embodiment. It's very important. We learn a lot these days in our heads, but my invitation to every single human being is to go and try it for yourself. Because so much of our lives we're conditioned to project and receive and outsource, but we're all divine. We're all powerful. We all have life force within us. And when we insource, we can then beam our lights out, and we can actually change the world, and we can be our fullest self. And so for me, I decided to do this. I was like, okay, cool. Nothing to lose, everything to gain. I had several different organs that were failing. And I was on 10 chronic medications. The doctors told me I would never have children. I was infertile. It was a nightmare. And I decided, biology of belief. I can believe the doctors. I can believe this medication. I was on it for 10 years. So I was really in that life. Like Big Pharma had me. I'd had 10 surgeries, you name it, I'd done it. And I was like, I was going to kill myself. So, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? I stop taking my medication and I lose my shit. Okay, well, I'll still be alive. So I got to that point. I pray no one gets to that point, but we're all able to have a switch point. That's not so dramatic. Emma Swain. Anyways, I slowly started to come off medication and drop into meditation. And at first, I had no idea what I was doing. Now, of course, I'm quite skilled in it, and I help my clients move through these processes in a method. But I knew that there was power in the hands, that if I laid my hands on my body, something would happen. So every morning for 10 minutes before work, I would lie on my floor and I would breathe, and I'd rub my hands together and place them on my belly. And I would start to visualize and breathe energy moving, healing my ovaries and my organs. About 1 month later, I went to go get a scan. And to the shock of the doctors, my ovaries were completely healed. Right. All the cysts were gone. I got a normal cycle. And my cycle now is so regulated that for any women or husbands, for your wives, this is a very brilliant tip. Women who are off contraceptive tend to synchronize with the moon. And now to the day, to the hour, my bleed and my ovulation synchronize with moon cycles. And so my healing was so deep through the body, and I worked through all of the blocks, because when you're sitting there on that floor with your hands on your tummy, you start to remember the times that you were heartbroken, or the bad sexual experiences that you had, or when people told you weren't good enough, or because you start to connect. Your body keeps the score. It starts to come into your head like, oh, I never sat with that. And then you forgive and you move, and suddenly your environment, your mindset, your emotional space shift, and your body heals.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing what the body can do. And I've heard many great stories, and you're another amazing one, that it's the actual solutions. Like, we have it within us, and we are powerful beyond measure. It's our belief system, that the fear factor that comes in, that plays that, we're not good enough, or that, we'll be rejected, that stops us from actually being able to be the person that we're actually capable of being. That's amazing. And if someone, what's a common theme that you see with men that you work with, that they come to you with their blockages? What's the most common blockage that you find, and where does it come from? And I guess, how do you help them actually get through it?
For me, I think the biggest block that I encounter with men is a fear of not being enough. And that causes them to disconnect. And so energetically, I find many men, their heart and their cock are disconnected. They have so pushed down or repressed or disconnected from these spaces that they can function from one or the other, but they're not functioning from both. And for me, I find that men desire deeply to set the vision, to open, to hold space, to be powerful, but they're so scared of being seen in their vulnerability and their wholeness that they shut off, and then they disconnect. And so that disconnect causes them to live a life where they never feel fully worthy, because they're projecting something outside to the world, and everyone's loving that. But on the inside, they're like, that's not fully me. I don't know how to fully drop in, and I don't know what will happen if I do. And I don't even know how. And so a lot of times when men come into my field, into my space, it's the safety of being held and seen, and then learning how to begin to reconnect. Not so that you become this emotional, super feminine, person. No. Because the divine masculine, a man in his full power, is a man who can be in his strength and in his cock and in his full energy, but from a place of love, not from a place of fear. Yeah. Many men are in the world putting out this aura of I'm super strong because they're super, super scared.
Yeah.
They're scared of not being enough. They're scared of not pleasing their woman. They're scared of not being seen by their friends. They're scared of not living up to the conditioned belief of society. So they're projecting outward and they're disconnected inward. And this begins to manifest over time with their bodies, with their sex life, in their marriage, multiple different ways that it shifts out. And at the end, it's like, where do I even begin? And so that's where we start to drop in and be like, okay, where is a place where the soul and the body can meet without the mind and the conditioned thoughts coming up? Can we go there? And very often from session one, you'll find, at least for me, despite being very feminine and girly, I tend to attract real big boys. Love you and Jay. I call them my big boys. These like huge men who are super powerful. And day one, it's like emotions, moving your emotional field unblocks. And oftentimes they don't know why. They're like, I don't know what's going on right now. And I'm like, it's beautiful. You're opening. Yeah. Let's start here. Let's start here. Do you feel safe? Where is it in your body? And the body and the emotional field and your soul don't function in the mind. So they quite literally don't make sense, like to the brain, like to our mind, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't need to. It's a divine healing that takes place when we reconnect into our field. And from that, we can begin to co-create with the mind. We can begin to shift our mind, believe something bigger, believe something newer, because the body and the soul and the emotions are moving. And so that's undeniable. It's like your brain can sit back all at once, but it's like something happened in that session that was weird. Like, I don't know. I've never met someone in the first hour we talk, I'm telling them my life's done, I'm crying hysterically. Like something happened there. Okay, beautiful. And then we start to shift belief systems. When did we start to believe we were not enough? When did we start to believe we needed to be this to be enough? When was the point where you felt shame or disconnect around your cock? When was the point where you got conditioned in your belief around your sex? When was that point when we started to actually embody this into our body to the point where we push down our pleasure, where we turn away from, where we can't even connect to the body? It's like, oh, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be naked. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to see myself. I don't know how to work with my cock. I don't know what's going on. When did this happen? Can we go there? Can we forgive? Can we, rather than judging, get curious? Like, a lot of men, they go in and they're like, I'm going to judge the shit out of that and I'm going to fix it. Like, no, it's not how it works. Yeah. We go in and we say, oh, hi, baby. There you are, age 13 in your first sexual experience. There you are when you're 8 and you didn't know. Okay, can we love that part? And can we get curious? What were you interested in at that point? What was there? What's stored? Can we release? Is there anger? Do you feel safe to express that? Do you feel safe to be seen? Suddenly, without thinking, without talking, just through expression and awareness, we unblock. The body starts to heal. The sex energy starts to move. The orgasmic potential starts to grow. The testosterone levels rise. I've had many men, fun results of SEM and working is their testosterone increases. They start lifting like 100 kilo, I don't know, men stuff, but big weights that they could never do before. And it's like, wow, yeah, of course, your body's responding to your life force. And so it, by nature, the weight drops, the heart opens, the way women speak to you shifts, the way you're perceived and seen shifts because you're seeing yourself in a new light. And so, yeah, for me, to summarize, it's shifting from fear into faith and finding a way authentically for each person to go there with love and curiosity and depth, and through the body we meet through this beautiful vessel.
Yeah.
And then we tap in And then we start to love our lives and expand, and the joys. It's ridiculous.
I love the point that you mentioned before about like men being initially closed. And, for me, it was a documentary I watched, but the true meaning of courage is vulnerability and being able to open up when of times of uncertainty, and even when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, but just having faith and belief that it's the right thing to do and being vulnerable and open, and which is something I found even with just doing this podcast. For me, I wouldn't be the type of person to share, myself or my life or my journey or anything like that prior to this. But as I've been opening up and doing these episodes and sharing my journey, I've even found more sort of inner confidence within myself, and not being, I guess, ashamed or worried about what other people think. And I think it's a real beautiful thing to have, that ability to just love yourself and not be worried about the, outside influences. And you mentioned about like the, feminine or masculine energy. Can you explain it a bit more? That from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, like we all have feminine and masculine energy, but where does it come? I guess the ratios, where are they predominantly now that you see in both men and women? And then in terms of where does it actually go back to being healthy?
So picking up on what you just said about courage and vulnerability, you cannot have one without the other. It's impossible. The greatest act of courage and bravery comes from a place of being willing to lose it all. It comes from the place of full surrender. It comes from the place of going in. And courage and vulnerability can be in many different respects, like falling in love or loving your child. It's such a courageous act to take on that responsibility and to actually love this life and to give it your all, but also be brave enough to like be that man, be that role model. And so when we're talking about masculine and feminine energetics and how we all have them, it's that very cusp. All of us have within us a vision and a strength, and the one that wants to penetrate and go into this world and be strong. But at the exact same time, to do that, we need to be so deeply embodied. We need to know ourselves. We need to know our vulnerability, what we're capable of, what we aren't through the vessel. We need to be in touch with our emotions. So many men believe that being masculine is being this strong, courageous warrior. But I've personally found that the most masculine men are the ones who can come home and say, I just want to be seen. Not fixed, not judged. I just want to be seen today. And the same with the feminine, dropping into these emotional places. And so how I like to put it with human beings in our self, in this vessel for all of us, is masculine energy for me is very linear. It's got the vision, it's moving, it's upwards, it's going in a direction. The feminine is cyclical. And we all have our patterns. We all have our cycles. We all have our ways of being. We all have our emotional breakdowns, our seasons, the way we do things in life. Whether we like it or not, we're patterned human beings. Oftentimes we're disconnected. We're either plowing through life with a vision or we're falling into this negative cycle. And then it's like we yank ourselves out and then we fall back in, and it becomes very extreme and for some unbearable. When we start to merge our inner energetics and see that we have both and they're equal in all of us, what we do is we create a spiral where our patterns and our emotions meet our intention and our direction, and then we begin to build a momentum energetically for ourselves. And you'll find very often times when people awaken, they get a big momentum. It's like suddenly they get a following, suddenly their purpose increases, suddenly their health expands, suddenly, and you're watching from the sideline on Instagram, like, what happened there? Like they were like nothing, and now it's like over like 3 years, they've got like, what happened? They merged. They recognized their patterns and their emotions, they validated them, and they brought them into their vision and direction. When we can bring our vision and our direction and recognize our patterns and see how that forms, we begin to form a spiral. From there, we can choose, do I want an upward spiral or downward spiral? Our downward spiral begins when we go into our victim mindset. When we're like, oh, I recognize all my patterns, and our full energy just goes down. Our upward spiral goes when we're like, wow, I see my patterns and I recognize how they're building my direction for my partner, changing the world, my company, my family, my health, my body. I can take everything that's happened and recognize it happened for me, not to me. And I can begin to set a new vision with all of this, because this is your momentum. All the shit we've gone through for the past 20, 30, 40, however old we are years, that is our momentum. That's what we have underneath us. And that is powerful because we can overcome and build that into our vision for where we're going. So I always say to people, if we've been through the works, if we've had the hardest time, and I talk from personal experience, my life was a catastrophe, to put it politely, on multiple levels. But that's the momentum. When you put your intention and you put it into faith, not fear, you start to upward spiral. And that expands you massively. And so whenever I am dealing with men and the masculine who are so in that linear mindset and they don't want to go to all of the emotional stuff, or they don't even know how to, I'm like, that's your gold, baby. When we go there without judgment, but with our clear intention of what we desire to achieve through this, and we feel the feels and we move through it, we begin to build a massive momentum for ourselves.
Mm. And how do you find it? I love the way that you mentioned it, like in terms of the masculine energy is just, vision direct, and then, the feminine, that spiral, that how do we, if we get into a relationship, for instance, as a man, and we find ourselves with a partner who is more in that, being obviously a partner, being a female, who's more in that masculine energy, and they're more just driven, and they're not as much into that, within their feminine energy. How is that challenging, or have you seen that in terms of the challenge with that? But also, what is some things that men can do to not use that as more of a reason to be more driven and more masculine, and then have, two masculine energy forces together that end up in a big sort of disaster?
Women who are very in their masculine do not trust the masculine. Because a woman's energy is there to, or the feminine energy is there to surrender, and we trust the vision. Now, very often our partners are a mirror of our own emotional and inner workings. So if you have a woman who's very in her masculine and not trusting you, very often that means your inner feminine as the man is not feeling seen, is not feeling loved, and hasn't been given the time of day. And very often men who are in the mind are like, the way I fix this problem is I plow forward, but they begin to neglect their inner feminine. And so their wife or their partner reflects that more too. Like, the feminine's not safe to surrender. I can feel it energetically. I don't trust him. And very often it's subconscious because it's an energetic exchange, but it's taking place in compounding. You are building that momentum in your relationship. Every time you fuck, every time you don't, every time you speak, every time you don't, you are building up that momentum between the two of you. Now, this is the beautiful part. The masculine energy has three major components. Of course, many, but to simplify, three. They are the warrior, they're defending, they are fighting, they are taking a stand. They're the fixer. So often with women, men feel they're being very present by helping fix us. They are solving the problem, they're giving us ideas, and vice versa for themselves. Oh, I'm feeling emotional. I should go punch a bag. I should go do this. I should do that. The mind, they're fixing. What a lot of men don't realize or are petrified to drop into is the third and the most powerful part of the masculine, your presence. When we think of God and what God is, it says, I am. It's presence. Nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to defend, just being. The feminine feels safe to unwind in her chaos. And let me tell you, if you ever just sit and look at a woman and say, I'm with you, full stop, and you hold space, you're going to start to feel the feminine release. And it's like water. It's like this massive chaotic storm that comes out, and she will whirlwind. And if you can stand in your integrity of presence, she will begin to simmer down, and she will come back, and she will then meet you. And very often then everything is solved and the energy has been released. Many times with men, when we want to really please a woman and our partner and help her drop into our feminine, we're petrified. Like, men are petrified of women's emotions. If you've ever seen a woman in full emotional flow, it's fucking scary. I scare myself. Like, I feel for you guys. I really do. My heart's there. But there is a power in dropping into your breath. And I always tell my men that I work with, anchor your cock. Just breathe in and hold and like be there. There's a power to it. It shifts. But how can a man truly do this with empathy and from the heart for women if they've never done it for themselves? When was the last time as a man there was a safe place within self to meet, to be seen? And a good part to ask, I always say, like, if we don't know the answer to this, is when was the last time you stood and looked into your eyes in the mirror without judgment, without noticing parts of the body you want to fix? When was the last time you just looked and perhaps started to say the words, it's okay, or I love and accept myself, or I am enough, like small, or maybe yes, or no. Certain words trigger emotions. When you look in your eyes and you're like, no, what comes up? What memory? Yes, what memory? Many men, and then immediately, often what men do when they start to feel this, women too who are in their masculine, is, oh, I need a Xanax, I need a glass of wine, I need to go have sex, I need to like watch the TV, I need a therapist, like everything to fix. And then we breathe. Nothing to fix, nothing to defend. We start to blame mentally. That person did this to me. That happened. Okay. Breathe. Can I be present with you? With self, here, now. And when we drop into this practice, we move through the fixer and the defender, and we hit presence. Men, when they are able to do this for themselves, it shifts. It shifts in ways that are outside the mind. You do this every single day and you go back out to your partner, she's going to feel it. She's going to know it. You won't have to say anything, do anything, be anything different. You will be who you are. You will be anchored in your ability to be present in your masculine. You will find that your wife or your lover will start to soften. Yeah, she'll still be acing it at work because she's got her inner man, and women these days, trust me, it's nice, big dick energy, it's cool. But she wants to come home and fall into your arms. She wants to feel safe in your direction, even if it's not financial. Maybe your direction or your strength is your presence in the home space. Maybe she's the breadwinner. But men can provide that strength that no one else can when they're doing it for themselves. And she will mirror it. She will be your mirror. The feminine will mirror it to your masculine.
It seems like such an easy solution, but we find it so hard just to sit there and not try to fix things or try to do something. And it was, I had a situation where I was asking a friend, like, well, what do I do? Like, and he just said, the best thing you can do is literally nothing. Just listen and don't say a word. don't offer a solution because it's not what she wants. And then finding out that, just by listening and that you don't have to offer a solution, the outcome's far greater because then she feels heard. And then, like you said, then that connection sort of, it strengthens. But looking in the mirror, it's probably one of the hardest things for a human being to do because, like you're saying, initially we're looking for all the things that we don't like or that we're scared of, and being able to just hold that space and just stand there and say, I love you. You're okay. It's a really, like the first time I did it was that was recommended to do. It was a really strange sort of feeling. Like, am I really doing this? But then slowly, you actually start to connect with it, and it starts to become more than just, a thing that you do. So I think it's really powerful. I love that. And with men who say didn't have the presence of a male role model in their life, so a common theme these days is their father isn't present, and then they're brought up by their mother. So their example of, I guess, how to be is more from the mother's perspective than the father. Is that something that causes that confusion of what true masculinity is because they only see what the outside world shows? Like you're saying, like we've got to be big and strong and we've got to be tough and we've got to show that we don't care and all these other things. Is that something, does that influence the men that don't have those male role models?
Absolutely. Yes. The society and the world we live in today has a massive father wound. Many men come with the father wound. And my personal belief is the past is something that exists in our minds, and the future is something that exists in our minds. And what we have is our present moment. And so very often when people come forth with all of this past and all of this societal pain and lived pain in their body, they're not fully present. And so many men, before they're even able to start their healing journey, they're disconnected. It's reconnecting. And the first thing with the feminine, and even with like, what do I do if your girlfriend's freaking out, with your inner emotional space, your chaos, is validation. It's what the heart seeks. I don't want to be right. I don't want to be told I'm wrong. I want to be validated for how I feel. And validation is a very powerful tool in the healing journey because we can sit and we can be like, take out right and wrong. Let's just sit. How did it make you feel? Soul, betrayed, alone, scared, worried. Okay. Now where can we go from there? Can we be with this? Can we validate it? And oftentimes men who haven't had father figures, they will use that as their projection into the world for why they are the way they are, why they act, why they do. It becomes almost like their ego's safety zone, the safety mechanism for why they mess up or why they're not making enough or why they are aggressive or why they drink or why they can't hold on a relationship. But beneath that fear and that projection is a longing, an inner child, an inner emotional state that says, am I valid for being this heartbroken? And no one was right or wrong. And perhaps it happened for you. Perhaps it happened for you to shift cycles. I often say that the souls on this planet now are the breaker of generational chains and the mender of hearts. We are here to break the chains of bondage, of not being enough, of all the conditions we've had, and we're here to mend the heart. What could be a more powerful place for a man to step into than to be that man? And can we give ourselves the moment and the presence to validate everything, but then to come into who we are now and begin to choose what we actually desire? Because in that act of moving from projecting and living from a place of fear and self-protection into validating and being vulnerable and then stepping into faith, suddenly your momentum shifts. Suddenly your perspective shifts. Suddenly you're out of the victim and you're into the hero or the conqueror or the visionary. And it's that moment. Yes, this world has done some horrific things to many of us. In fact, all of us. There are traumatic experiences we go through. But at the same time, and that is the very momentum for you to be at the edge of your fear, and there is a polar equal opposite. We're in a world of polarity.
Yeah.
That is the depth of faith. That is the depth of power. That is the depth of purpose you are going to begin to embody into when you choose.
And is that where essentially the birth of purpose actually comes for individuals, where they find their true selves and in terms of what they're really meant to be doing? Can you go in a bit more about actually finding purpose? And once you align to who you truly are and accept yourself and what, that life has happened for me, not to me, like you were mentioning before, that how, we find our purpose from that.
I call it the awakening. So we are born of flesh and then we're born of the spirit. We have different birthing processes we go through in this life. And many a time we have formed an ego, all of us, and we go through an ego death. An ego death is where everything that we believe to be true, everything that we found identity in begins to die. And we come back in. There's so many lights outside of us that switch off that we're almost forced to come within. And oftentimes it's at that point we realize there's no light on inside at all, that we've been outsourcing our light from everything. And we feel like there's nothing in us. And we call that the dark night of soul. This place is the most powerful place to be. Because if you can lean into that darkness, you're going to come out into the light. It's a truth of life that this will happen. And so when we allow ourselves to be broken and we shatter, very often that is the very blockages that are holding our soul from being seen. And so, yes, when you go through an ego death, when you feel so scared, when you feel so alone, when you feel there is nothing left, that is the awakening point to be like, can I let it go? Can I surrender? The heart of the feminine, surrender. Can I trust that there is something for me in this world? That life isn't just happening to me, that it's for me, and the third stage of the consciousness is through me. So life starts by happening to us, and we have our identity, our way of thinking, our way of being. Then shit hits the fan, and it hits the fan for all of us. There's a point where it just happens. Like, prepare yourself in many different ways. We have a death of the mind. It's like that was not, no one prepared me for that. They told me it would be different. It's not. It's a different world. It's like and we break. It's very often then that God can actually meet us for the first time, that we're so vulnerable, that we're so open, that we're on our knees. Literally, surrender is not a cute word that all these spiritual girls talk about. It's when you're on your hands and knees and you're like, there's nothing left. For me, it was when that overdose hit and the flatline happened and they pumped my heart back, and it was like, there is nothing left but this body now. And then it's like, okay, what if it had a purpose? Curiosity rather than fear. Softening in your strength, where you know that you are nothing and everything, and that you're meant to be here. And so life can start to happen for you. You start to recognize this, like, oh my gosh, when that person died, when I lost all that money, when that horrific moment happened, when I went through that divorce, it was a wake-up call. It was waking me up to my purpose. It was waking me up to who I'm meant to work with. It was waking me up to the healing I'm meant to do. It was waking me up to how to heal my body. You become grateful for the grief. They're interwoven.
Yeah.
I often say to people, grief and gratitude, if we allow ourselves, are a dance. And suddenly life can then begin to move through you. And that's where your purpose hits, where you realize everything in your life was actually happening for you, and it was meant to move through you for others, because we're here for a bigger purpose. We're not just here for our small self, for our small issues, for healing our mind, for working through our traumas and being stuck in the rat race of the healing process. We're here to raise consciousness. We're here to recognize that there is more to life. We're here to recognize that we are divinely supported and guided. We're here to know that we have soulmates, soul connections, a life to live, a body to love, passionate sex, enjoyable sensations. We're here for it all, to live a life of pleasure, ease, and bliss. And to find that there's a depth that comes to our faith and our purpose through the pain, through the suffering, if we allow ourselves to go there. It's to build out our depth. And that's when God or life or source or our channel can move through us. And we start to upward spiral our momentum.
It's it's amazing through that journey. And it's something that I'd hope for more people to understand, that your past, your experiences, that's actually a gift to, and I know during the moment it's really hard to see, but if you're able to see that gift, that's where life actually really begins. And there's nothing worse than repeating that cycle. And I always suggest, if something hasn't worked for you in the past and you keep doing the same thing and getting the same result, maybe it's time to try something new. You've given us so much knowledge and wisdom here, and I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. So, where can people connect with you, Emma, in terms of, if dads or men want to reach out to you and find out more about yourself? Where's the best place for people to connect?
My best spot is Instagram. I'm hoping you guys are all M Swain _coaching is where you can find me on Instagram. And then I do have a website, mswain.com, which you're welcome to go to. And from there, there's ways to contact me as well. Awesome.
And if you had to share one piece of advice, they had one piece of advice that you could pass on to people, what would that advice be?
Your greatest power as a man is your presence, and to begin to open space to be present for yourself. Maybe if it's just looking in the mirror without judgment, maybe for just 2 minutes a day, and start to be curious about what shifts in your life for you and through you, with your partner, your family, your kids. It's a miraculous experience.
Men, you've heard it. Presence. It's literally all you got to do. You don't need to buy flowers or any expensive gift. It's just it helps sweeten it. But the main thing is actual presence, and also not only with your partner but also your kids. And you are the example to your to your family. So it all starts with us. As Emma's made many suggestions through this podcast that, in terms of the things that we can do, and, just having a good look at ourselves and just stopping and removing the noise and asking yourself the questions. So, Emma, thank you again for your time and your wisdom. It's much appreciated, and it's great to connect with you again after Bali. And everyone, please, share and like this episode and connect with Emma, because she has so much to offer, and I know that you'd also gain a lot of value working with her. So thank you again, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Hey everyone, I really appreciate you listening to today's show. It means a lot to me that you are part of the journey and mission to help fathers be the best dads possible. I'd really appreciate it if you review the show and share it with someone you genuinely believe could benefit from this content. Please visit resilientdad.com for more content and resources as we build this community for dads everywhere.